Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a very safe and contemplative and productive and lazy and Netflix-filled quarantine. I am Saksham Sharda, I'm the creative director at outgrow.co, and today we are here to record a special episode of Outgrow's Marketer of the Month podcast. And the episode is called Skills You Can Pick Up Online During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I have with me here Pulitzer Prize winning journalist and the head of communications at Property Ledger's Amy Vernon, and also the inventor of the hashtag as well as the #1 hunter on AngelList's product hunt, Chris Messina. And we are going to directly jump into the rapid fire round because I forgot to press the record button earlier when they were saying hello and hi to the audience. Anyhow, we're going to go to the first question. The top 3 people you think of when I say coronavirus. Amy.
Fauci, Trump, and Cuomo.
Chris.
Probably Tom Hanks, Fauci, and Trump.
On a scale of 1 very stable to 10 highly unstable, how would you rate the condition of the world economy? Chris.
On a scale of 10, I would say the world economy probably about an 8. In the U.S. or at least in the Bay Area where I am, things seem relatively stable. But I'm seeing stuff coming out of like Venezuela and other parts of the world where things do not look very stable.
Amy, on a scale of 1 to 10.
I'd say somewhere around an 8.
Okay. The biggest professional mistake you've made in your life, Amy.
I insulted an idea of the publishers without knowing it was her idea in a group meeting.
Wow, what was the consequence of that?
Actually, I really suffered. She ended up taking it really well, but it still wasn't a very good idea.
Wow.
Chris.
I feel like there's been so many. It's like, where do I begin? But I think the lesson that I've learned, having done this 3 times, is to just not go into business with your romantic partner.
Okay. The biggest professional mistake I have made is forgetting to press record on this podcast.
It's good. You're making new mistakes.
All right. First place you'd go to for a vacation once coronavirus ends, Amy.
Well, we take a vacation every summer to somewhere with a pool for my son's birthday, so it would be somewhere with a pool.
Okay, Chris.
Nice. I always love going to Hawaii. It's always a really good sort of, way of reconnecting with nature. However, I don't know if if the pandemic continues and then it pops up again, I can imagine being on an island maybe isn't the ideal spot to be.
All right. The most marketable skill you've picked up over the course of your life, Amy.
Asking questions and listening to the answers.
Chris.
That's a good one. I think really it's been about figuring out the value of having a deep curiosity, an intentional rejection of cynicism.
Okay. How long does it normally take you to get ready for work in the mornings, Amy?
I can do it in 10, but if I'm really being fair, it would probably be about half an hour.
Okay. Chris?
It takes me honestly like an hour and a half, but it's sort of a leisurely, get up, take a shower, listen to 2 podcasts and make breakfast and coffee.
Worst thing about the coronavirus isolation, Chris?
I went on a long hike actually yesterday in the Redwood National Forest, and there was just, moments where you could see people kind of, inching away to the other side of the trail. And of course that's necessary, but it just reminds you that, everyone basically is like suspect in this massive game of Clue, and it just kind of adds a lot of tension.
All right, Amy.
It's we have a lot of really great little neighborhood restaurants and stuff, and I miss being able to grab a pizza when we want to, have a pizza as a family. It's just sort of like those little things.
Okay. My worst incident was someone was sitting at the bus stop and I went and sat next to them, even though I kept a seat in between, and they got up and left. And I was just like, that was my worst thing. I was just like, okay, well, they didn't even pick a fight. They just left. And I'm just like, okay. Best thing about the isolation, Amy.
It's interesting because we're now 4 of us in this house spending basically 24/7 together, and have been really not had fights. And so it's realizing how well our little family unit actually gets along.
Chris, best thing about the isolation?
I mean, in some ways, there is some beauty in the, I guess, repetition of the day, the schedule sort of, being pretty much set. Whereas last year I was traveling every month and a half to a new city, a new country.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day, Chris?
2.
I've actually gotten down to the point where I'm having like 2 every 3 days.
Okay, that's nice. Do you cover your face with a mask or mask-like material outside, Amy?
Yes.
I only do when I go to grocery stores now.
All right, on the spot question: what color eyes do you notice the most when you go out, Chris? Behind the mask.
Jeez, that's a really interesting one. I don't know that I notice eyes at all in that way. If I did, I would imagine it's going to be lighter eyes. But actually, I have no idea. Yeah, that's interesting.
All right, Amy, what color eyes do you notice the most when you go outside when you see people behind masks?
Honestly, I've not been going out very much. And when I have, I've been annoyed at the people who are completely incapable of follow the norms of social distancing. So I'm just trying to get what I need to get and get away from everybody. So I don't think I'm noticing anyone's eyes.
Fair. Rough estimate of the number of friends you have who have been laid off work, Amy.
I mean, somewhere between a half dozen and a dozen. It may be more. Not everybody is as vocal as others, but at least that many.
Chris?
Yeah, I feel like there haven't been too many friends that have specifically, told me about it, except actually my roommate. So, that literally hits close to home.
Next question is, are we going to see Corona babies, Chris? Chris,
yeah. I mean, we're going to see Corona babies. We're going to see Corona divorces. We're going to see all sorts of things that come out of this. I mean, the stresses that people are under as a result of having to shelter in place with quote unquote loved ones who they're, maybe you're starting to question, how deep is your love? I think is real.
Amy, are we going to see Corona babies?
Yeah, but I do kind of feel like we're going to see more Corona divorces than babies, perhaps, because that intense 24/7 is not for everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. How many tabs do you have open on your browser on an average, Amy?
On an average, I'd say at least a couple dozen, but I use a browser add-on that lets me have 20 of them that I can sleep. So if I were to include those, it's at least 40 to 60.
All right, Chris.
Is it the Suspender? Do you use the Suspender app?
I use Sidewise.
Oh, Sidewise.
I use Suspender, and I use the one that just kills it because I don't have the energy to kill it. all the resolve to kill it. I just can't kill it. So yeah, okay. Chris, tell us, how many tabs do you have open?
It's very spiky. I sort of go through a process. I tend to prefer to have a pretty, I would say, clean digital workspace. But right now I feel like I've got 20, and I think that's average. I like to keep it around 4 or 5, and then I have what are called site-specific browsers. So sort of they take the little web apps out of the browser and put them into their own tabbable OS level app, just for convenience. And so that adds another 10 or so apps probably.
Okay, who's your favorite Tiger King character? Chris.
Carol Baskins.
I'm gonna leave it at that. Let's go to Amy. Who's your favorite Tiger King character, Amy?
Actually, I'm blanking on her name, but the person whose hand was eaten.
She was the best.
Yeah, they were.
She was so solid.
Yeah. She was the sanest. Did Carol Baskins murder her husband, Amy?
Yeah.
Chris?
100%, and fed him to the tigers.
That's your favorite character.
Hey there, cool cats and kittens.
Name me one celebrity who has coronavirus, Amy.
Marianne Faithfull.
Chris.
Tom Hanks.
The most unmarketable skill you've picked up over the course of your life, Chris.
Procrastination, for sure. Although I'm learning more about it, and there's more ways of forgiving myself for it, which is like sort of the emotional or like avoiding emotional pain or something. So, but yeah, I learned about that when I was procrastinating on something I was supposed to do.
All right, Amy, the most unmarketable skill you've picked up.
An enormous depth of knowledge about Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, I remember that. When was the last time you were outside, Amy?
Actually, yesterday we sat out on our back deck for probably about an hour or so, which was really nice because it was a gorgeous day.
All right, Chris.
Also yesterday, although probably outside was on Saturday, so it was 2 days ago when I went on a nice long, 4.5 hike in the woods.
Okay, so that's the end of the rapid fire round. Let's go on to the bigger questions. And the first question is, do you think it's true that the recession will wipe out smaller companies and leave bigger companies without much competition?
I was actually talking about this with my husband the other day because we were talking about, when we break quarantine next week for another shopping run, where we're going to go and what outside food we're going to pick up. And, I was saying that we really need to go to our neighborhood pizzeria and, the places like Sonic and McDonald's and all the chains and everything are going to exist after this. But our little neighborhood ones aren't. But then I was thinking about it, and a lot of the chains, what we forget, are actually owned by small businessmen or women. They're small business people. They're the franchisees, and whether or not they survive is certainly a question. I think in the short term, a lot of small businesses are going to collapse, but there's other smaller ones that are sort of springing up to meet the differing needs now. I'm a big history nerd, and I've been thinking actually for the last probably 15 years or so about the beginning of the last century and the beginning of this one, and when we were going to start seeing similar issues like the rise of the labor movement, which we've started to see, the pushback against the large corporations, which we've been seeing, the fight for better working conditions. 100 years ago, it was about the work week and child labor, and now it's more about healthcare and the all the jobs that have your hours low enough so that you don't qualify for benefits under them. So it's sort of different things, but it's very similar things, and that caused a huge convulsion that broke up a lot of monopolies, and that rippled really throughout all of the 20th century until sort of the last quarter of it, as the pendulum started swinging back. And I just feel like with everything that's going on and with the pandemic happening at the same time as the economic convulsion, that short term, yes, a lot of small businesses are going to collapse, but long term, the effects on the larger corporations and potential for them not surviving long term, history says that that will happen. I mean, I'm not an historian, but I follow some on Twitter, and they've been seeing a lot of parallels to the beginning of the 20th century. The beginning of the 20th century, and I feel like long term that the big businesses are not going to fare as well as they are going to in the short term.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I certainly think that there's a lot of small businesses that are going to really struggle through this time. And the thing that really just concerns me the most is the kind of almost like, you have like a tsunami wave, and then you kind of have like the aftershocks or something. For some reason, this comes to mind when a friend of mine was teaching me to surf. She sort of pointed out that usually there's like sort of like waves that come in threes, and you want to kind of like wait for the third wave or something to actually like, ride that one. Even if the first, two might seem large. And that's just like the pattern that they follow. And in a similar way, I feel like there's kind of like the frontal wave that's coming through like right now, when we can sort of see the impact, and we can see the unemployment claims, and we can see, the immediate businesses that just, either were early in their journey, didn't have a lot of cash in the bank, or, were really like working on the margins and didn't, let's say, have a established community to support them, in lean times, and they get kind of like wiped out. And it's really like what do they call it? There's a certain type of wave that kind of, a rogue wave, I think, that kind of comes up afterwards. And that's the thing that actually does all the damage, because it sits around and kind of like floods your community, and you don't know when it's really, when the waters are going to recede. And so I feel like in a similar way, there's going to be this like, frontal assault essentially on our economy. And then there's the slow process of seeing a bunch of other things just like fail, or just like not be there when you thought that they would be, because you had no idea that actually they were struggling or something, because they had no way of actually communicating it or that, and sort of like, treading water indefinitely, until you just expire. And so I think that the slow burn for some businesses is going to be like the real hard part. And we don't know, again, all the interconnectedness. It's interesting. I've also been watching a bunch of nature documentaries, and there's one that's really great on Netflix called Night on Earth. And there's this kind of observation that there are these, I don't know if they're like bridge species or something, but they're sort of the in-betweens. And whether they're little like, bugs or rodents or something like that, you kind of don't think about them very much relative to, let's say, jungle cats, and I don't know, like amoebas or something. But they actually keep the whole ecosystem, working. And when you remove one of those species, it causes this horrible situation. I think wolves might be one of them. In any case, I kind of feel like there's a similar set of both service providers, small businesses, all the little, kind of folks who fill in the cracks and make it all work. And I imagine that those folks are going to really struggle, in this economy, and it's going to have it's going to create a lot more burdens on businesses that used to, live and breathe based on them. So yeah, I definitely think it's going to happen.
No, I completely agree with the rogue wave and the bridge species analogy. I think that's why there is such an emphasis in several economies on the importance of small businesses. I think the German economy is a prime example of this, because it is almost wholly comprised and tilted in favor of small and medium-sized businesses. And that's actually something that has made it resilient to past economic crises. But what I also wanted to say, keeping in mind what Amy has said about the radical socioeconomic change in the US and the world economy that was already in progress for the past 15 years before coronavirus came along, and that has been exacerbated with the arrival of coronavirus, because Amy says that while small businesses might suffer in the short term, there are other small businesses that might arise to serve the new demand chains. And it's not necessary that large businesses won't suffer in the long term because of this. So one can also apply the metaphor of natural selection out here. Clearly, the virus has caused a disruption, and the fittest or the most versatile are going to survive, whether they are small, medium, or large businesses. And another thing to keep in mind is that, coronavirus is obviously an exceptional circumstance, but we have seen continuously in the past, some sort of a downturn that happens every 10 years. Like we had a crisis in 2009, and then before that, and so on. So I think the small and medium-sized businesses need to keep in mind that they have a maximum of a 10-year window to get their resources in order, just in case something happens and forces natural selection once again.
Because I think it's worth, on the one hand, it is worth to look at history to sort of get some sense of how things have been dealt with before. I mean, a lot of the things that we're talking about now as part of the recovery efforts, whether it's physical distancing or contact tracing, has actually, those ideas, those behavioral technologies have been in place for possibly like hundreds of years, or at least 100 years or so. And so like, there's not a lot of newness in terms of how we're thinking about the response, but I think it would be a mistake for businesses to also not recognize that the nature of business and the nature of entrepreneurship, I think, has changed and evolved, or at least it's always been the same, but now it's a little bit different because the access to information is so much greater than it's been before. And so, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but there are a number of opportunities for businesses to actually, to use your natural selection metaphor and to sort of expand it a bit. Natural selection takes place over successive generations, over thousands or millions of years. Whereas in this case, you can literally be on Twitter and see some information and be like, oh, right, actually, I can totally reform my business. And what I thought was my business and where I thought the value was actually isn't there anymore. And so I need to change. And rather than waiting for 15 generations in the future to kind of have something happen organically, you can actually, bring that future into the present a lot more, I think, easily if you're willing to make the leap and take the jump. I can talk about an example that I had recently about this, but I think that it's important to sort of draw that distinction that although there will be echoes of the past, what do they say, that history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. And I think it's very important to think about what's different in this moment to give people a chance to, I hate to say it, but make the most of this circumstance.
And I think the corollary to that, though, is that there's also far more access to misinformation.
Totally.
And not just about the pandemic, but even to your example, where a lot of people, something works for them and they forget that, correlation is not causality, and assume that that's the way it is. And I've seen so many people just over the last 10 years latch onto an idea of well, this is how you do things now, and it might be for them, but it very often isn't.
It's a fair point.
Yeah, completely agree. So a couple of points that you guys have made is natural selection, but also really rapid natural selection that's happening, and also it's
sort of more maybe it's entrepreneurial selection.
Yeah. And also it's a lot of times based on luck, because as Amy is saying, there's information, but there's also misinformation. And what I'd also say is there's an information glut. There's too much information. So there's all three of these going on, which is why I think it's kind of important to I was listening to the co-founder of Vice, who has been on a podcast with Edward Snowden. So what they're trying to say is that, there's so many news outlets publishing news that's happening right now. So what we're not covering so much is opinions of philosophers or kind of celebrities of our age, like philosophers or historians or, entrepreneurs of our age, on what they think of this whole crisis as a whole. So that's some kind of misinformation. So not misinformation, but information that's kind of important. So I think they're coming out with a series, but they've only just interviewed Edward Snowden, and he thinks there are going to be 4 waves of this virus, or you were talking about the more dangerous wave that comes after this, the economic dangerous wave. So stuff like that. So I'm it's to the ability to look at the bigger picture from all the misinformation and the information glut that's around you. So let's try to move on to the next one, which is what are some marketable skills one can work on during this time of social distancing in order to get ahead of the curve? So analytics, coding, anything you guys want to come up with? Chris, you can start on this one.
Yeah, I think some of the skills that you might want to be thinking about during this time, for me, it does come down to a bit of self-management, emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and just sort of all in the theme of maybe self-management. And I say that because we don't know exactly how work is going to change. And if, people listening to this are more or are information workers, and I don't want to make that an assumption, but if I were to speak to information workers, obviously there's a shift towards a lot more online work, a lot more digital work, a lot more work that doesn't necessarily have to be done in a shared office space. And the dynamics of that are quite different, both, or maybe specifically from a personal management, self-care perspective. There's no one else to sort of, check in on you per se, although maybe you can, set up social connections or whatever that do kind of help you out with accountability and that kind of hey, have you eaten today kind of thing, or have you showered this week? Are you wearing pants? Those types of things, which hopefully you're still aware of. But, I think those are the types of skills during this time that I think are worth looking into. Certainly, there's a lot of professional development that you can do. You can, learn some coding, learn analytics. You can learn some Python. You can, I downloaded this new coding framework to try out, even though I don't really code, with the thought that I'll learn it during this time. But I think it's really important to recognize this, again, can go on indefinitely for quite a while, and that the impact is going to be huge. And that if you're sort of, again, like holding your breath kind of emotionally or spiritually, thinking that we're going to get out of this in a month or so and everything's going to go back to normal, I just think that's not necessarily realistic. And even when we do start to, return to public spaces, the atmosphere is going to be different. We're going to feel different. We're going to feel stressed differently. We're going to interact with people differently. There might be, again, like some of that tension that I alluded to on my walk, where, you just don't know if, folks have, are currently infected, like have been infected, are immune. And that kind of, paranoia, I think, does or will affect some people more than others. And so I think it's just really important to sort of like have that steady state within yourself. And now is a great time to work on that.
Mm-hmm. Amy?
I think if you have the time and you're sort of in the mental place to do it, which if you're not, then absolutely what Chris is talking about, it's no time like the present. But there are so many free online webinars and free coding, Code for America, and there's so many different opportunities that I feel like it's if it's something that's interested you and you find you do have the time to do it, then go for it. It's all there and it's all accessible. So I think it's good for everybody to understand like the basics of coding. I don't think everybody needs to know how to code, but I do think everybody should have a basic fluency in coding. So and it's something that's helped me a lot, because I've been able to I could build a website, but it would take a really long time and it probably wouldn't look that great. But I have the knowledge in HTML and CSS to be able to do that by myself if I had to. But I've never had to. But what it's done is it's enabled me to work with designers and developers very easily to get what I need in the best designed way, or to get what a client needs in the way that works the best. So certainly I think if you're in any, and obviously I feel like probably a lot of your audience are marketers or people who would be interested in going into marketing. And I do feel like any marketer who has knowledge, basic coding knowledge, particularly if you're talking about, web development, it's extremely, extremely useful. But other coding too, like I've had engineers who do, predictive analytics and stuff like that, who saw that I understood SQL, and so the conversations I was able to have with them literally changed. I saw the conversation, like you could almost see visually the change in the conversation, because it was sort of like, oh, this is someone who actually basically understands. And then they were also very happy to explain things to me that I didn't, because they felt like I would get it. So, like I said, while I don't think that, everybody needs to learn to code, I do think it's extremely valuable to have have some basic understanding so you can have that conversation. The same with analytics, particularly if you're in marketing, to have a basic understanding of analytics is hugely valuable, because then you can sort of bumble into the analytics programs and find your way around, and you actually start learning it. I've taught myself, lots of different analytics programs and HTML and CSS, and I've enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot more from people who knew a lot more, because they saw that I actually wanted to learn and that I had by myself.
Yeah, well, we all agree that in our fields, coding is probably very helpful. It is also not like a complete necessity. Like personally, I'm terrible at coding, and I figured that out when I took coding in high school, and it really brought my grades down. And since then, I've mostly been like, I'm not going to do this again. But that doesn't mean that I lack the creativity that a coder somehow has, which is why I use a variety of no-code tools and work for a no-code tool company myself, Outgrow.co, that allows you to design applets, widgets, and interactive content without using any developers. And I think what both of you have been saying is that during this time of the coronavirus crisis, it's how adaptable someone is and how creative they can get with what they already know without, taking too much pressure on themselves. That might help them judge what they should be learning in this quarantine and social distancing time. So at this point, I want to tell our audience that we actually have a link on this podcast's landing page where you can search over 101 free online Ivy League courses from Harvard, Yale, etc. in humanities, marketing, business, analytics, even coding, science, and health. Do feel free to check them out. And also another thing to keep in mind is all the information about what's happening to the society around you. So for this, I usually come up with an example of what I've personally done in this time. With the ban on public gatherings, most restaurants around the world have been forced to turn into takeaway and delivery spots. And not all of them want to use Uber Eats or Yelp as delivery services. And so I managed to design a simple build your own burger interactive menu like the one you see in McDonald's, where you pick your bun type, meat type, vegetable, etc., and get a customized pricing option so that these restaurants in my neighborhood could put them up on their website and collect orders and make automated deliveries. And all of this is just totally possible through no-code tools. But speaking of this whole obsession with code, coders, and coding in general, as some sort of a universal hack to the economy we are living in, what do you all think about the coronavirus itself, operating like a code, the way it's ruined the whole supply chain economy that's, very code-based? So that's what a virus is, right? A creature on the edge of life that is just meant to replicate a particular function again and again and again without any sentience or conscious decision.
Yeah, I guess I'll just jump in there. The coronavirus itself is essentially a type of algorithm that binds to our existing biology and exploits the way in which our body replicates and does all the things that it does. However, one thing, I guess, on the one hand, what I like about your metaphor there is that code itself isn't self-aware. You can run code and it'll do things, but it doesn't have any volition unto itself. And I was listening to another podcast recently, and it was very strange because the speaker, whose name is Scott Galloway, I think this was the Pivot podcast, was sort of talking about how the virus wants to sow discontent amongst us and wants to separate us, and that's the enemy, and the enemy wants us to be disconnected from each other or something, and so we can't coordinate or whatever. And right now we need to come together. And I'm like, I don't think the virus cares. It's sort of like this errant thing that exists in the environment that happens to find. It's weird, right? Because I guess this is your point about not listening to enough philosophers. It's like, what is the point of a virus? Why does a virus exist in the environment? How does that actually come to be? And it is sort of just like a piece of code that copies itself and then replicates itself and then it doesn't want anything. I anthropomorphize it myself. But yeah, in a way, I suppose maybe having a more useful analogy, what is this? It's sort of like, when I feel like it's like Outlook people send you emails and there's this S-MIME file that's always attached and it doesn't do anything as far as you can tell. It's sort of this innocuous piece of text that gunks up your mail. I feel like it's a little bit like that. It just kind of floats around and lands on humans, and humans happen to be susceptible to it. And it's not like the virus designed itself or cares. Right? It just kind of happened that way. So yeah, it's sort of like a weird errant file that just kind of copies itself. It's, there's a reason why we call those things viruses or malware in the computing sense, right? The analogy came from biology first.
Yeah. And actually to that point, even a computer virus doesn't, it's just doing what it was designed to do. It's not, it's not, it may be let loose in a certain company's computers by a human on purpose to do something to them, but it's still only doing what it was designed to do. And that's what, I mean, that's, I think that's actually a really good analogy of it being, and I think until we start thinking of it properly, that's why I hate all these like analogies, like these war analogies, like we're at war with the coronavirus, COVID-19.
But it's not at war with us.
No, we're not. We're trying to find it and stop it. And if we stop at one place, it's just going to continue in other places. It's like and it's not because it's smarter than us, and it's not because it, studied Napoleon pre-Waterloo. It's doing, like Chris said, it's replicating because that's what it does.
It's not a sentient being, in short.
No.
It's not like, it's not, there's a very famous quote that comes to mind, and it's very relevant because assuming the United States is or was the superpower until now. Moby Dick, Captain Ahab is vengeful against the whale, but that's what Starbuck tries to tell him. But it's not a sentient being. It didn't actually bite off your, because I think he's missing a leg or a hand because it intended to. It just did it because that's what it does. It wasn't trying to be vengeful towards you. It's not that the virus is, being like, oh, I'm going to like get people. No, it's a creature on the edge of life. It's just a code that's just doing what it's just meant to do. So it's a very bizarre situation.
No, but what it's doing in terms of the economy is it has shown us by accident. I mean, it didn't mean to, but a byproduct of it is that it's shown us a lot of weaknesses in our economy, in how we function as a society. And it would be to our benefit to pay attention to that and stop thinking about it as a war, but rather thinking about how can we change things so the next time one of these comes along, because it will, because that's what viruses do. The next time there's a pandemic, that it doesn't have this, crushing effect on our economy. I mean, Kevin Cruz, who's this one historian who I do follow on Twitter, someone asked him for his opinion about, historically what this is like. And he said, well, we've never actually been through a time like this in history, because you had like 10 years between the influenza pandemic that started in 1918 and the stock market crash, which didn't immediately result in the Depression. It took a few years before it really took hold. And he called this like disaster Voltron, because it's just, we've piled multiple disasters on top of each other. But the virus doesn't care. It's not like it was like, ooh, I can crash the economy. That would be great.
Yeah. The virus has no concept of what an economy is.
No.
In short, the bigger question is, what does it have to say about the economy that an insentient code managed to crack it? And which is why, as a marketer or a data analyst, one should be, if one has to train oneself anything, is to actually use this entire situation that's happened because of the coronavirus to actually educate oneself about this happened. What was wrong with the economy? Look at the bigger pattern, I guess, one of the things one could do. Let's try to see the next question, which is...
Well, actually, I mean, on that point, though, because I think this is a very interesting question to ask, because at the very least, you can look at the last several years of I would say, criticism and critique, especially, given candidates like Andrew Yang and Bernie Sanders in, the US, talking about these income disparities and talking about the need to, pull more economic resources, namely money, from, the economic 1%, and to redistribute it through the economy. And you do have to kind of ask this question. And I think it has been asked, but with some... I'm not exactly sure the right lens for this, but there are lots of millionaires and billionaires who are starting to use their vast resources to try to confront this issue. And rather than and we're sort of finding, at least in the United States, that a decentralized, uncoordinated effort actually is kind of problematic, given the the way that the supply chain operates. The supply chain is like much leaner than I think, we could ever really imagine or fathom. And so when there are stresses put on it, for example, toilet paper, you start to see how that system isn't necessarily designed for a certain kind of resiliency or shocks to demand. I think toilet paper is like just this amazing example. Whereas, we at least had seen, let's say, fuel shortages, in the 80s. When basically the cartels were like, well, we're just not going to give you any more oil. And then suddenly the U.S. has been on a path to energy independence, like as a result of that. And, I don't know if we're going to get into a place where each of us produces our own toilet paper. So we have toilet paper independence. But like the lessons from the last sort of issue or experience like this, resonates over time. And so had, let's say, Andrew Yang been president, or had Bernie Sanders been president during this time and had enacted a bunch of those policies, which he'd been arguing for, how would this situation be different? Would we be in a better place? Would the federal government be able to do this like ridiculous kind of, bailout, which, may not be sufficient? And also what lessons and mechanisms and fixes are we applying based on the lessons from the 1918 Spanish flu influenza, or I think there was another one in the 50s or something. And how have we actually mitigated some of these challenges because we have information technology from these tech giants, which manipulated us into using all of our attention and abusing us, et cetera, and yet are the places in which we're able to find, granted, there's lots of disinformation and misinformation, useful information from reputable sources that allow us to actually change our behavior much more quickly than, let's say, it would have happened in the turn of the century.
I completely agree. And I was just saying the other day, the fact that Andrew Yang and everyone were talking about the universal basic income, which no one really agreed with and thought was completely stupid, is now actually happening. Well, in Spain, for instance, they've introduced it and they expect it to continue after the virus as well. So they actually made it a law that has no end at present, and they've done it consciously, saying that we actually want to have a universal basic income. And I would never have imagined it as something that would be possible. I mean, I've heard Finland was experimenting with it, and Andrew Yang is the only one who was talking about it in the Democratic primaries. So I also look at these, like, if you were to look at like from a very broad historical perspective, maybe the presence of candidates like Andrew Yang actually heralded the fact that something like this was bound to happen, which they probably saw that we should have universal basic income before something happens that forces us to have universal basic income. And I think that's how we're progressing historically.
But isn't it always the case? I mean, I feel like that's the thing, right? You sort of stay in your steady state situation, where you're, moderating and modulating, deviations from whatever your norm is, from whatever your steady state is, until you have a shock to the system. And you realize that the way you were doing things actually won't prevent the kind of, pain or loss that we're experiencing now. And so what are we going to do? We're going to change a bunch of things to shore up against this. And I guess I find what's so interesting is the kind of residue of memory does fade somewhat, quickly. I mean, after the Ebola crisis with George W. Bush, there was a bunch of pandemic readiness that was prepared. I think maybe that was when they really focused on physical distancing as a technique to slow the spread of these, viruses. So it's not like we haven't seen this even somewhat recently. It's that a lot of the funding that was going to those things goes away after the immediate sort of, pain or burn or rash or whatever you want to call it, that's on society kind of goes away, right?
Well, you stop. I mean, in this case, Trump just disbanded the office.
Well, exactly. Well, that is exactly to my point, right? Where the pain of the Ebola crisis was so far in the rearview mirror that it was just like, oh, it's not that bad. We'll be fine. And then you realize, oh, wow, actually when it happens, a spike like this is something we are not prepared for because of the resources and attention that it requires. And so you do have to have kind of, elder statespersons kind of reminding you, by the way, we are not prepared and it's going to go really poorly. And it's interesting to have Fauci in the position that he's in because he was the guy that I guess has been in that position with the CDC through not only a number of administrations, but through the AIDS crisis, through Ebola. And so he's seen this stuff before. And, I mean, it's such an interesting contrast to hear, a politician that's, been in place for, 3 years with someone who's really, dedicated their life to these types of problems. And, he looks at it very matter of factly and we've been here before and we are not prepared. And so therefore, these are the options that we have.
It's. I was actually looking at Statista. They had this list of countries most prepared for an epidemic. Now, this statistic, which is actually true, had been like it surfaced in October when this started to happen. Or I think November, December. This was for the past 5 years. They were just looking at developed nations that were most prepared, and the U.S. was actually pretty much on the top. And now, like even the information that Statista had based on what steps had been taken to prepare a country for an epidemic, all of that has been like completely overturned now that we are actually facing it, and none of that actually matters because all these countries are in a huge amount of trouble. So that's just something that came to my mind regarding the US's preparedness for an epidemic, despite and the amnesia around epidemics of the past, for instance, the Ebola one, and how easy it is because of the information glut to actually forget important things.
Well, I think also that what we forget is that the virus may not be sentient, but we are, and human beings are subject to whims. And something like this, the preparedness of an entire nation can be subject literally to the whim of one person, and all of that preparedness thrown away.
Completely.
I love how we're not named that person, but we all know it is.
I believe it's subject number one.
Yes.
Individual number one, sorry. Individual.
And his news network. Wait, who said that? I didn't say that. Anyway, all right. So the next question is, you've both been in managerial roles at several companies. What skills, professional or personal, do you think will you or managers in general be looking out for after the epidemic? We can start with Amy this time.
Sure. I think it's kind of hard to say, because it's also what I guess there's two ways of looking at the question. One is what will this pandemic cause me to look for as qualities in an employee, versus what things will people have learned from it that will make them more valuable employees. I think both of them in the end come down to a versatility and a natural curiosity, and the ability to, I mean, that's really what versatility is the ability to adapt to changing conditions. I don't know that that's really any different than I ever did. I like to hear about how people have sort of faced a challenge and how they adapted to it. You know, when you go into it, I mean, no job you ever go into ends up being exactly what, no job is ever exactly what the job description is. But sometimes it's less so than others, particularly in startups where things evolve so much. So really, for me, it's the ability to, even if you're thrown by the direction something is going, to then just pick yourself up and be like, okay, now what do we have to do? Which is a very abstract skill, and you sort of have to get at it by asking a lot of questions. But I think really that's just something that serves people well, no matter what.
Chris?
Yeah, it seems that a lot of the skills that you're going to need, in any kind of job, are just somewhat more, amplified in this moment. And I agree with a lot of what Amy said. And I think I would perhaps add to that the need for self-management and communication as being like two really core, skills or areas of development that are going to come into, really their own importance in this moment. Obviously, I mentioned about self-management and just self-awareness. What are your needs? What are you doing for self-care? Are you going out and getting, a walk in on a regular basis? Are you eating well, sleeping enough? Are you able to turn off the news and, the constant stream of updates? what are you doing to sort of just, maintain your emotional and mental fitness? And then the other piece of that is about communication. So once you have that awareness, how do you communicate with others about what you need, or about your progress, or your work, or with things that are coming up? Because especially if more of us are working from home and are working remotely, and we're having to coordinate and deal with schedules and things like that, it's very important for us to be able to communicate what our needs are and what our boundaries are. And for folks who either struggle with conflict or require kind of face-to-face interactions, this really puts your ability to communicate clearly, succinctly, and without any passive aggressiveness or sort of obliqueness. In other words, being indefinite or unclear about what it is that you're trying to say. For example, like, I really can't meet you, today because I'm just like feeling super stressed out, and the kids are going crazy, and I haven't eaten in 3 days, and I'm waiting for delivery, and all this stuff, to be able to sort of push back on certain things and to make sure that you are resourced when you're working with other folks. So I think it's those things, and in some ways, I guess like we were talking about, whenever this return to, or I guess I don't even like this idea of like a return to a normal. It's almost like coming back from vacation and like picking up from where you left off. I feel like it's more like, how are you going to integrate this new reality as parts of it become or return to something that seems familiar, but yet is completely different? How will you show that resilience over time? And can you think of a time during this pandemic when you really struggled, and what was your response? And what did you learn about yourself? And how did you incorporate the lessons from that learning into how you act now? That would be something that I'd be interested to learn about.
No, true, because it's interesting how both of you have actually picked out personal development as the key thing, because at our company we'd made a widget that helps people just look for courses online during this epidemic. It's just called 101 free online Ivy League courses for your coronavirus isolation. And in that, one of them just happens to be Yale's Science of Well-Being. And there were a lot of clicks on that course, and then we went and read online, and it has had 1.2 million signups since the coronavirus crisis began. So I think the emphasis has been kind of on personal development, I'd say.
Well,
I imagine. Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, no, it's also an extremely stressful time in a way that I don't really know too many people alive now have undergone. I mean, I think certainly people who lived through the civil rights movement had extreme stresses, but I think for like people who are in the workforce now, for the most part, this is a wholly unique. This is different than. And I'm a New Yorker, a native New Yorker. My parents are native. Well, my mom's a native New Yorker. My dad moved here when he was 13. September 11th was a huge stressful thing. Everybody I know knew people who died. As did I. But this is. I hate to repeat it, but it really is disaster Voltron. This is like multiple things happening, multiple things. Any of them would be huge stresses in and of themselves. And then, and there's so much uncertainty around both the illness and its long-term effects on us, and the economy and its long-term effects on us, that it sort of makes sense that those are things that people are reaching for, because they've never had to deal with this many different types of stresses with so much uncertainty on top of it. And then you had many people who were already under extreme pressure economically, because the way the gig economy has evolved over the last 10 years has really, really changed the workforce and made a lot more people with like a lot fewer people have benefits. That changed somewhat with the ACA, but there have been a lot of changes over the last 20 years, and that a lot of people were already feeling a lot of economic stress and a lot of health stress because of the healthcare situation. And then this on top of it, it's really the stresses that people are under right now. It's really unprecedented. And the fact that people are reaching out to find any way to deal with that is not at all surprising.
Chris, you were saying something as well?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. So I was going to say, the next one is, okay, well, there has been a lot of stress, but there are also a lot of people out of jobs. So the next question is, what are some of the ways in which people can make money online during this time if they've been laid off? Affiliate programs, freelance work, websites, etc. Chris, you can begin if you like.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I don't know exactly how this trend is going to go, because on the one hand, suddenly lots of folks are offering, courses, and other kinds of, digital downloadables, little ebooks, things like that, and they're charging for them. And I've noticed in general, it seems as though there's a lot more content online that has, sort of a paywall or some other, price attached to it. And I just feel like the internet has gotten a lot more expensive lately. Everything sort of has a subscription in front of it, and payment through the digital layer now is a lot more commonplace. And so, on the one hand, there's lots of things that you can charge for. I think the question then is, how do you go about actually finding customers and selling what you're doing? And I guess for me personally, it's an interesting moment too, because the travels that I'd mentioned were to go speak in other places, and I would get paid to speak, and that was kind of like how I was making money for a little while, in addition to product design and consulting. And more recently, I've started to offer half-hour consulting calls using a new platform called SuperPeer. And it's really great for me because on the one hand, like, it's very sort of like fast and quick. I can make a little money off of it, and I think people get some good value out of it. So there are those little more kind of, I don't know if I want to call it like piecemeal opportunities, but these platforms and tools that offer you to schedule your time, charge money for it. It takes care of the scheduling process, the billing, and usually they take a cut. So there's lots of opportunities there, I guess, whether that's just selling your time, your attention, your skill, teaching other people. And then it's a matter of figuring out how to get that in front of people. That I think is the challenge. But there's a lot of directories that I've seen. I'm a very active member of a community called Product Hunt, and there's been a number of different services and tools that have come up that are like, hey, here's some, if not volunteer opportunities, places where you can, pitch in or create content and then quickly monetize it. So I don't know, lots of stuff is out there. Similar to how it was before, but now, of course, if you are not working, full time or commuting, you can use that time to take your knowledge of Battlestar Galactica, for example, and publish premium content.
Come in handy someday.
Now's your moment. So,
right, Amy.
The interesting thing about that, and I think that's those sorts of platforms are very valuable. And I agree. I feel like in certain ways the internet is becoming more expensive in those ways. But part of the problem there is that if you haven't already built a following in whatever it is, or built a reputation, whether it's in freelance writing or in design or something like that, it's harder to find it now, especially because a lot of other people who might have been your customers in the past no longer have jobs, or they've had to tighten their belt because their business, is making a lot less money and they've laid off their staff. I think it's going to be interesting when we come out of this to see how the platforms like TopTal and Fiverr and others have fared, like how much their ranks have increased. I'd love to know how many more applications for being on the platform TopTal has gotten, because they really put you through major tests to make sure your skills are really that you are the top talent. So I think that will be very interesting. I think it's just in terms of if you've been laid off and you're going online for work, I think finding those platforms like what Chris is talking about are going to be a better route just because they're drawing in audience for you. But I don't know if the customer base for a lot of people is necessarily there. And if everybody who's been laid off starts doing it, it then does to other things what the glut of writers online did for freelance writing, and which made it so that you used to be able to make a good living as a freelance writer, and now unless you have a very specialized knowledge on certain topics, it's a lot harder to, because no one's paying good rates for freelance writing. So if the same thing happens in, whether it's in UX or in design or web development, just because it was writing that it happened in before doesn't mean that it couldn't in these others. If a lot of people find themselves out of work, and then you start finding people underbidding each other, and in the end, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I wish I knew, because
yeah, I mean, strangely enough, right? Like the market dynamics are such that there's going to be a flood of folks, on these platforms. And I mean, one of the other things that I've seen on Product Hunt is not just like the opportunities, but actually lists of people who have been laid off by, tech companies who are now suddenly available. So you have, a pretty skilled labor pool joining into the overall labor pool, which previously, at least, the unemployment rate was relatively low. And that's going to really change, I guess, what people are going to get paid. So to look at this another way, maybe right now is actually a really good time to start a company or start a business, because hiring, talent is actually going to be a lot more accessible. Now, of course, that requires that you have the capital to do so, and you have an idea and something to put out there and offer, and it might be, some lean months, but you're not going to have to necessarily pay the same rate that you used to have to pay to get, like a programmer or a designer or any of those folks, because suddenly, I mean, for what it is, like they're out of work and they're going to be looking for opportunities. So there is that option as well, if you're willing to take that bet.
Yeah, and I was also thinking that because there is an information glut out there, there is simply too much information. One of the ways that one can make money right now is by making simple no-code information sifting tools for the affiliate programs of companies like Amazon, HubSpot, eBay, and Shopify. So what happens is that in an affiliate program, for those of you who don't know, you get a commission every time you direct someone to Amazon's website and that person purchases something. So it doesn't even have to be the product you directed them to. They could have just ended up on Amazon through your link, and then whatever they end up buying, you get a cut of it. And from my experience, I've usually seen a lot of bloggers and vloggers and Instagram micro-influencers using e-commerce quizzes and recommendations to direct their traffic to these links, and then they end up making some money out of that. So for instance, like if you were a cooking blogger, you could make a simple recommendation that suggests items one can buy to maximize cooking efficiency, or, items you need to buy for a particular meal. And then in the outcomes of this simple quiz, you can just put your affiliate link and direct people to eBay or Amazon or somewhere. So what I'll do is I'll put a link on this podcast's website to a list of the highest paying online affiliate programs. So you guys can actually just go and check it out there. Okay, so the next question is an audience question. There are many online courses for acquiring skills. Should one aim for those that provide certifications or not?
I don't know. I think it sort of depends what that certification is and who the certification is from. A lot of people sort of like create these like social media certification. I don't know what that, I don't know what that means. How do you certify? It's like, I know what Twitter and Instagram are, and I've used Snapchat. I don't know what that means. I think that there are certain certifications that have technical, or they don't have to be technical requirements, but specific requirements, that it says that the person who has this certificate knows these 6 things, or whatever it is. I just think you have to be really careful. I do think that a lot of employers traditionally have sort of been, they like seeing that. They don't really know what it means, but they like seeing it. But I I just feel like if you're going to actually spend money on something like that, make sure not only that it's something that the certification is going to mean something, but that that you actually learn something from it.
Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly don't know because I never had to look into it. But if I were to advise someone who was considering it, one simple solution might be to think about the types of places that you would like to work. If you have a list, and to actually reach out to their, recruiters and to ask them, would this be relevant or worthwhile, or can you, suggest a program that would be relevant to you that you look at, because it sort of doesn't make sense to sort of make an assumption that just because you're, pursuing some sort of, course that offers a certificate that afterwards it's going to actually mean anything to anybody. I know a lot of companies in Silicon Valley would ignore any type of certificate and would be a lot more interested in looking at your GitHub repository or your contributions to some open source project as a way of actually validating that you know what you know, because that's real world stuff and you've actually had to work with other people, let's say socially, on some coding or development project. And that's going to say a lot more about your ability to jump into a new team and start making contributions right away than if, for example, you learned something through a coding boot camp, came out the other end and actually have no idea how to, contribute to a team's repository and how to check out other people's code and, make commits and stuff like that. So, I think it's about demonstrating your knowledge of, both the tools and any type of technical information that you need to operate those tools effectively, but then also how you use those tools in a social context, working with others. So I think that's a way to think about it.
Yeah.
Mm. All right. So the last question is, why do you think there is a perceived need to pick up a skill during the pandemic, during this human crisis? And what does it say about our age, Amy?
You and I have talked about this, and I have very strong feelings. There was this meme going around, and I was like, if you don't use this time to, start your side hustle, learn a new skill, blah, 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 then it was never about not having the time. It was about lacking the discipline or something like that. And I saw that, and I actually got really pissed off because, like I was saying earlier, this is a time of really huge crisis. People are under enormous stress. First of all, people who are still working, it's not like they have this copious free time. I mean, maybe they, were commuting an hour each way to work, so they have that extra time. But first of all, they don't have all this extra free time. Second, the people who've been laid off have enormous stresses. They're trying to figure out how they're going to pay their bills, how they're going to do all these things. There's a huge disconnect between sort of the hustle lifestyle. And I've hated side hustle. I hate the word hustle because to me, hustle means two things. It either means a disco dance from the 70s or it means you're trying to con people. That's what hustle has always meant to me. And I know that's not what people mean when they say it now, but it's still, I feel like the idea of having this this worshiping at the altar of the side hustle has made people think that they need to be busy all of the time and that they can't have time to just sit there and relax or just try to feel a little less stressed. People who are actually having to go outside of their houses to go to work, the stress that they must be feeling every day is, I can't even imagine. You have all these people who work in the supermarket and people are like, oh, they're heroes. And it's like, they're not, they're making minimum wage or maybe, a little more than minimum wage. And they have to work because otherwise they're not going to be able to pay their bills. And that's not heroism. I'm not saying that in a negative way at all. I'm just saying that it's ignoring reality to say that. They're working in the supermarket because that's how they pay their bills. They didn't grow up saying my goal in life is to be a cashier. And I'm I want to make it clear that I'm literally not saying there's anything negative about that, but I'm just saying that we've come to believe that like everybody who wants to achieve something has the ability to, and it's just not true. And we need to give people time to actually mentally heal. I have two children, one of whom spent his 16th birthday yesterday. You know, just we let him have the TV all day for video games, and we watch Westworld with him and stuff. And my younger son misses his friends in school. You know, there are going to be psychological effects on us and on our children that we won't even know for years. And the idea that you have to pick up a new skill when literally the world is in crisis, both in terms of a medical crisis and in terms of a financial crisis, either of which at any given time would be stressful. And, you know, I mean, I know I've beat this drum a few times here, but, you know, you got to cut people a break. You got to let them just like sit back and relax. And if they have those 2 extra hours of free time, let them just sit there and watch TV or spend time with their family or read a book or play a video game or sleep. You know? There is no need to learn a new skill. If you want to, and if you feel like that's what's going to be healthy for you mentally, knock yourself out, like learn all the skills, you know, you desire. And that's great. And, you know, everybody processes these things differently. And some people need to do that. Some people need to keep busy like that to do well, but not everybody does. And to regard those who need to step back and not, you know, hustle as somehow wanting less or deserving less, I think has been a very detrimental aspect of the society we've been living in for most of my life.
No, definitely, yeah. Like, what if there is nothing at the end of this epidemic? So would you have rather spent your time just picking up a skill all this time when there was actually nothing? Like, what if it never ends? So you didn't actually live life, you were just preparing for the life that was going to come and it never came. But yeah, Chris, how about you? What do you think?
Yeah, you know, I think the whole hustle porn thing is real. There's an industry, I think, behind it that likes to sell you, you know, the equivalent of muscle milk or whatever it might be, you know, to sort of keep you going. And one of the, again, I'm just going to keep harping on this because I think it's so important. One of the sets of new skills that you could really focus on and learn during this time is self-awareness, is, you know, self-care, is emotional fitness, is, you know, understanding and developing more emotional intelligence. I just think that, you know, everything that Amy said is right. Like, people are living through a new set of stresses, a new environment, and those things are real. And your ability to adapt to them and to respond to them and to take care of yourself, I think benefits everyone around you. And so if you don't already have those skills, those are the first skills I think to pick up. And then once you're in a place where you are resourced and you're able to take care of yourself and you're able to take care of the people around you who are expecting or are needing support from you, maybe because they don't have the same awareness or opportunity to develop that self-awareness, then you can, you know, contribute to their own, you know, well-being too. And so then once you've got that sort of like, you know, mesh of support figured out, then I think you can start to think about, okay, how do I improve my mental acuity, or how do I develop some new skills, or how do I pick up, you know, whether it's a new programming language or a new, you know, app or framework, or, you know, really get into the nitty gritty of how to develop no code style, you know, products and applications. All of that stuff, I think, is there waiting for you. But I think it requires first to really take that time to settle into this new, you know, situation. It just feels like, and one of the things that I've heard from, I would say, like the professionals in like the medical, you know, business or area, as well as just other, I think, you know, more sage like political leaders, you know, is the notion that if you over prepare during this time, or if you over respond, and it turns out, you know, that let's say the curve bends in the right direction and so on, it's very hard to really, I think, relate to kind of like the negative space of success. Like if we flatten the curve and things aren't horrible and, we don't have like 1 million people dead, it's hard to sort of congratulate us because obviously there are still people who died, but probably less than what would have been the alternative. So I feel like in a similar way, an overreaction in your personal life to really take care of yourself emotionally and to find that routine of self-care will pay off in lots of very subtle ways that you just can't measure if you didn't do that work, right? Like maybe you would have had a mental breakdown. Maybe you would have gone through a divorce. Maybe, your kids would, be destroying your house. I don't know. There's lots of negative adverse outcomes that could result if you don't actually take advantage to develop those skills. So I guess I just come back to that again. And I just think it's such a rare opportunity in human experience to have a justification, like a reason to be able to take that time for yourself in a way that otherwise might seem self-indulgent. But I think in this moment is entirely relevant, worthwhile, and should be pursued.
No, I completely agree, which is what the other day I was saying, maybe every 2 years we should have 1 month of quarantine so that people can actually take a step back from the rat race and actually contemplate.
Well, I mean, if we just, rewrote holidays to be more about like self-care days, and it was okay, to sort of, just not have to worry about commercialism and like buying things for people and, having more holiday lights than your neighbors or something like that. We sort of make a competition out of everything. And I guess if we were to compete at who has the best self-care and the best emotional fitness, maybe those are the type of Olympics that we should actually be engaging in at this point.
All right. So that's the end of the episode. Thanks for joining us, Amy and Chris, and see you guys again soon.